So here's the question. Why did we trade 10 terrorists for one traitor? 10, you say? What are you talking about, 10? There were 5 Taliban leaders, all released from Guantanamo Bay. Gitmo. And it wasn't 10, you say? Well, you're wrong. It was 10. And I'm going to tell you where and how. And what we got back in exchange was a traitor who's ashamed to be an American, by his own statement. Back in August of 2013, a mere, 9 months ago, we released 5 Guantanamo detainees as a goodwill gesture in order to get the Taliban to enter into negotiations with us so that we would be able to cut this deal. Obama released, quietly I might add, 5 Taliban inmates from Guantanamo to open the peace talks in Afghanistan. Now, that was on a bunch of news organizations back in July 29th of 2013 and in the first days of August. There was no official announcement. There was no publicity. They kept it quiet. They didn't talk about it. They didn't have a White House lawn press corps release. But they released 5 members of the Taliban from Gitmo to open the peace talks. Quote, a top U.S. official said the prisoners were released under the condition that they will not engage in any violent activity. That was from Ynet News and Breitbart. The activity of those people that had been released was obviously not an open discussion for question because they were being held. But it was done as a move to open the door for the United States to discuss with the Taliban future releases, including for Bergdahl, and the idea that we could come up with some sort of a peace talk with the Taliban in Afghanistan in anticipation of pulling out of there. So they got 5 people back in August or July, and then 5 more for Bergdahl. Now, the real question in here is why we swapped 10 known terrorists, and I don't care what kind of assurances they're going to give us that these people won't go back to acting against the United States or against our American soldiers who are over there. And frankly, I don't care whether you believe in Afghanistan and you think we should be or shouldn't be there. I don't care whether you believe we should or shouldn't be in Iraq. That's immaterial. And here's why. We have soldiers and men and women over there. And they're dying and being wounded and being maimed while they're there. And whether or not you agree with the political reasons for what we're doing over there or anything else makes no difference. The real question here is whether or not Obama is using Bergdahl and the withdrawal of Afghanistan to empty Gitmo and utilize that as an excuse to do what he can't figure out how else to do. Or whether or not he's actually complicit in their efforts to destroy Western society and institute a global caliphate. We know he's been extraordinarily sympathetic to Muslims, We know that he's been extraordinarily sympathetic to extremist Muslims. Now, I don't care where you stand on the issue of Islam and all the rest of that. I'm only talking about a group of people, and look, there's 1.5 billion Muslims on the planet, okay? If only 1% agree with the concept of Muslim extremism, think about the number, folks. Think about that number. 1.5 billion Muslims total. That means that there are, 15 million Muslims who agree with the extremist viewpoint. 15 million. That's a sizable army, folks. We know that this administration has been open, accepting, gracious, beneficent, bending over backwards to try to help them. We don't know why. We know that they've been smuggling weapons to Al-Qaeda and extremist Muslim organizations in Syria. We know that's what Benghazi was really about. So the question really is Obama not just guilty of misprision of treason, but is he guilty of betraying his own nation in favor of his Muslim beliefs? Or is he simply an absolute idiot? I believe that you can call Obama a lot of things, but stupid I don't think he is. What we do have is an organization that has acted for all intents and purposes as if they are diametrically opposed to their own nation. Susan Rice, who has about as much credibility as Charles Manson, and an equal amount of blood on her hands, I might add. She tried to couch this as, we don't leave our men behind. But that wasn't the attitude and the way she dealt with the issue of Benghazi. She says he wasn't a hostage. He wasn't simply a hostage. He was an American prisoner of war captured on the battlefield. So why didn't you think that when 4 men were killed in Benghazi and many, many more were wounded? I got to tell you, none of this to me makes any sense. Congress, and of course they're making political hay out of this, so don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. This does not absolve them of their responsibility for their own misprision of treason regarding every aspect of their own functional jobs. But they're coming out and screaming bloody murder. Why weren't we notified? See, every time we set ourselves up like this, I don't care what excuse you can give me, whether this guy was captured on the battlefield or not. We have a phrase which says we don't negotiate. We don't negotiate with hostage takers. We don't negotiate with terrorists. We don't negotiate. And we've had prisoners of war in every war that we've ever had. And I get it that, you know, prisoner swaps are a long-standing tradition. But did we get the fair end of the deal? Or did the Obama administration just get a chance to push its agenda along a little bit further? Their agenda, of course, being the absolute, total, and utter destruction of the United States, at least the core and the fabric of the country as we know it and expect it to go on. They want a fundamental change of the way that the country works. They want fundamental changes of our political beliefs, of our social beliefs, of our religious beliefs. They want fundamental change of the way that the country operates fiscally. They want a fundamental change of the nature of freedom and liberty. They want fundamental change into a caste system where there are only two castes: the elitists, the globalists, the friends of the administration, the corporatocracy, and everybody else. You don't have to look far to see how that's been accomplished or what their goals are. You don't have to look far at all. It's there. All the proof you need is right out there. They've been doing it now for 5 years. And don't misunderstand. Bush did the best he could to accomplish the same agenda for the 8 years he was in office, as did Clinton for the 8 years he was in office, as did Bush Sr., as did even Reagan. I don't understand what America is waiting for. We're going to reelect in November 90% of the incumbents in Congress. 90%. I hear you say you're unhappy. I hear you say you're disgusted. I hear you say that what's happening in our country is wrong. I hear you say that we're being betrayed. But I don't see you doing anything about it. What I do see is Americans who are willing to let bygones be bygones just mere seconds after they've been sold out. I see a nation that is completely, abjectly apathetic and complacent. And they're not even interested in mediocrity. They don't have a problem with being the lowest rung of the ladder. It's like not a death wish, a wish to be a third world country, to be led around by a ring through your nose like a bull. The Ministry of Propaganda enjoys extraordinary credibility. How and why anyone would give this government and this administration and this Ministry of Propaganda arm of it's just I mean, according to his own fellow soldiers, this guy was a traitor, or at least a deserter. He sent an email to his parents just days before he left. One of his fellow soldiers, a guy by the name of Gildersleeve, said this: "You want it from the horse's mouth? Here you go. We were at OP West, Paktika Province, Afghanistan. It was a small outpost where B Company 1, 501st INF, Airborne Infantry, ran operations out of, just an infantry platoon and ANA counterparts there. The place was an Afghan graveyard. ANA is the Afghan National Army. The place was an Afghan graveyard. Bergdahl had been acting a little strange, telling people he wanted to, quote, walk the earth, end quote, and kept a little journal talking about how he was meant for better things. No one thought anything about it. He was a little, quote, out there. Next morning, he's gone. We search everywhere and can't find him. He left his weapon, his kit, and other sensitive items. He only took some water, a compass, and a knife. We find some Afghan kids shortly after who saw an American walking north, asking about where the Taliban are. We get hits on our voice interceptor that Taliban has him, and we were close. We come to realize that the kid deserted his post, snuck out of camp, and sought out the Taliban to join them. We were in a defensive position at OP Mest, where our focus is to keep people out. We knew where the blind spots were to slip out, and that's what he did. It was supposed to be a 4-day mission, but turned into several months of active searching. Everyone was spun up to find this guy. News outlets all over the country were putting out false information. It was hard to see, especially when we knew the truth about what happened. And we lost good men trying to find him. PFC Matthew Michael Martinek. Staff Sergeant Kurt Robert Curtis. Staff Sergeant Clayton Bowen. PFC Morris Walker. SSG Michael Murphy. Second Lieutenant Darren Andrews. They were all KIA from our unit who died looking for Bergdahl. Many others from various units were wounded or killed while actively looking for Bergdahl. Fighting increased. IEDs and enemy ambushes increased. The Taliban knew that we were looking for him in high numbers, and our movements were predictable. Because of Bergdahl, more men were out in danger, and more attacks on friendly camps and positions were conducted while we were out looking for him. His actions impacted the region more than anyone wants to admit. There is also no way to know what he told the Taliban. Our movements, our locations, tactics, weak points on vehicles, and other things for the enemy to exploit are just a few possibilities. The government knows full well that he deserted. It looks bad and is a good propaganda piece for the Taliban. They refuse to acknowledge it. Hell, they even promoted him to sergeant, which makes me sick. I feel for his family, who only want their son or brother back. They don't know the truth, or they refuse to acknowledge it as well. What he did affected his family and his whole town back home, who don't know the truth. Either way, what matters is that good men died because of him. He has been lying on all those Taliban videos about everything since his capture. If he ever returns, he should be tried under the UCMJ for being a deserter and judged for what he did. Bergdahl is not a hero. He's not a soldier or an infantryman. He failed his brothers. Now sons and daughters are growing up without their fathers who died for him, and he will have to face that truth someday. Folks, that's from the mouth of one of his countrymen, loyal countrymen. Did we get the better end of this deal? 10 terrorists for one traitor? I don't think so. I don't think so. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't have gotten him back, even if it's only to try him. I am suggesting that we shouldn't have swapped 10 known, dangerous, high-level terrorists who I guarantee you we will see in news reports and in short order that they are back to operations. Now, the 5 that were transferred most recently for the direct swap for Bergdahl, they were sent to Qatar. Qatar has assured us they can't leave the country for a year and that they'll keep them out of mischief. If you want to call warring against our country mischief. But the truth of the matter is that they can do an enormous amount of damage, and you can bet that they will be surrounded by sympathetic people who will be telling us one thing while allowing them to do something completely different. Why? Because in the world of Islam and the Muslim world, deception to non-Muslims is a way of life. It's expected, it's anticipated, it's desirable as a trait. We know that we don't have any friends over there. They're with us to get our money. Their alliance to us and allegiance to us is only directly related to their own benefit. As soon as that benefit ceases to exist, we're abandoned. And they walk away washing their hands of it, saying, well, the Quran says we have the right to lie and cheat and steal because they're infidels. And in fact, it encourages that activity. So will Qatar protect us from those 5 Taliban? Hell no! They most certainly will not. I don't care what kind of assurances they gave Secretary of Defense Hagel. And if one American boy or one American girl dies as a result of these 10, not 5, but 10 traitors being released, then Hagel and Obama and Rice and the entire Pentagon executive organization that was involved in this should be charged with murder. Murder. Because the action that came about as a result of their misprision of treason resulted not only in the betrayal of their nation, but in the deaths of those citizens who will come to die as a result of these people being released. You've been listening to America's Voice now. We're going to take a quick break. Before we do, I would like to make sure that you are aware of the American Resume Service, one of our sponsors, who has graciously agreed to support this program by making a $100 donation for every person that takes them up on their offer. Their offer is essentially this. They have a $200 resume program out there to either create or refresh the existing resume you have. They're going to do that for 50% off only for America's Voice Now listeners. So it's going to cost $100 to you. That $100 in total is going to be sent over to America's Voice to support and keep this show on the air. I think that's a very gracious thing for them to do. And you, on the other hand, can, 1, write it off your taxes because it's an expensive finding a job. 2, you'll get yourself a very, very well-written resume and some great counsel on what you can do in this tough job market to find a job. You can call them, you can visit their website, and you can email them. Their website is AmericanResumeService.com. You can call them at 417-264-2486, or you can email them at info@AmericanResumeService.com. Make sure that you see our friends over at Battery Station, one of the longest-term sponsors we've had. They have flashlights from Surefire. They have flashlights and batteries. They make, by the way, they make their own 123 lithium-ion batteries. These are the same ones that if you buy them in Walmart or one of the stores out there, they cost you $2 and $3 and $4 a piece. Battery Station has their own private branded one that's made here in the United States. Made in the United States. And it lasts far longer than the competitors out there. I use it myself. made right here in the United States by one of the top battery makers in the nation, private branded for them, and they sell it to you for far less than you would pay to get one of the brand name versions. Batterystation.com, 417-257-7799. Batterystation.com, 417-257-7799. See our friends over at Pizza Hut around the nation, but especially here on Porter Wagoner Boulevard in West Plains. Tuesdays and Thursdays, reduced lunch price, and on Tuesday evening, kids under 12 eat free. We'll be right back.